accessible, the likelihood that that firearm will end up in the wrong hands is high. And nobody wants to learn later on that a firearm that they owned and did not secure was used in a violent crime to harm somebody in our city or another. With that being said, we're also going to launch a new program, and this will take place, the first one, next Tuesday, January 28th. This is a gun surrender program that the Austin Police Department is sponsoring, where members of the community can come in and surrender a firearm they no longer want. This may be a firearm that has been in the family for a while and is no longer desired. It may be something that's been handed down, it's been sitting in the top of a closet somewhere. We are willing to take possession of these weapons and have them destroyed. This is a system where you will merely show up on the date. We will do multiple of these. The first one, again, is next Tuesday, January 28th, between the hours of 3 p.m. and 8 p.m., and it will be at the East Substation over off of Springdale Road. And what we will be asking for is individuals that want to surrender your weapon. There are the simple steps that we would ask that you follow. First of all, ensure that the weapon is unloaded. Have the weapon and ammunition separated if you have ammunition as well. Please have them in paper bags if possible, again separated, and in the trunk of your vehicle. And when you arrive at the substation, you'll go in and you will meet with the officer that will be there. The officer will come out, take possession of those firearms, and then again we will put them in our evidence room so that they can be tested and entered into the NIBIN system, but then they will be destroyed. This is a no questions asked program. We will not be trying to identify individuals that are dropping off weapons. We merely want to get weapons that are no longer wanted off the streets, out of the homes, and destroyed so that they don't end up potentially in the wrong hands if there was to be a burglary. So this is something that, a service we want to provide to the community, again, all in an effort to get unwanted firearms properly disposed of. So if there are questions on this program, I'll take them now. We do have additional information on future dates when we will be hosting Gun Surrender. We've done initiatives like this in the past. We've actually done cash rewards for gun surrender programs. This one is just merely providing an enhanced opportunity for members of the community to come and surrender a weapon. So if there are any questions on that, we can start there.
Are they successful? Do you find people come and participate and drop off weapons?
Yes, we have had success before with people surrendering weapons, and that's again why we want to offer this. Oftentimes, there may be through death in the family or just through the generations, firearms that have just been passed down as either heirlooms or because there was nothing else to do with them. And so oftentimes we'll find that individuals that don't want to possess a weapon but have come into possession of one through, again, that way that they'll bring them forward and surrender them.
And you said APD's done this before. Is it correct to call this a new program? And if so, what makes it new?
What's new about this is the emphasis that we're putting on this, the fact that we're actually assigning days. We'll be bringing in officers so that they are there solely for the purpose of taking these guns in. And again, we're putting a big media push behind this as well. So I think there's a lot of things that we're doing here by scheduling this, again, multiple times through the year. And depending upon the success, we will continue, or we will even do them more frequently if we find that they are successful. Okay. I want to move on and talk about an incident that occurred last night. This incident occurred at 10:06 p.m. in the 800 block of West Cesar Chavez. This incident involved two citizens riding their bikes along the street, again in the 800 block of West Cesar Chavez. One of them did happen to be an off-duty Austin police officer that was just in plain clothes out for a bike ride with a family member. And as they were riding their bikes, there was a suspect that approached them in the opposite direction on a skateboard. As the suspect passed the officer, she heard noise behind her, and when she looked back, she saw that the suspect had in fact sucker punched her husband, striking him in the face. He was knocked to the ground and injured. The officer turned around and went to help, and at this point, the suspect in this incident turned around as well, pulled out a knife from his waist, and threatened both our officer and her husband. Thankfully, she was able to utilize her training to bring this to a peaceful resolution in that moment, in that she was able to both call 911 and retrieve pepper spray and let the suspect know that she was calling 911. The suspect at this point left the scene. Officers arrived within minutes, and immediately located the suspect down on the trail that runs parallel to the city's library, just a mere block away. The suspect was taken into custody and has been charged at this time with aggravated assault. The case does remain under investigation, and that's all the information we have at this time.
We didn't get a suspect's name on that release. Do we have his or hers, the homeless person's name?
Let me check and see if we've got, first of all, you said the homeless person. We do not have an indication at this time on this case that the suspect was homeless. In fact, our records do show that the suspect has an address. As most of the time, it's hard to tell if at that time the person is living at that address or not, but we do show that the person in this incident actually has an address. And I'll have to check to see whether releasing the name at this time would interfere with that ongoing investigation.
Is there any indication that they knew each other, or this seemed like a random attack to you?
No, everything shows that this was just a random attack.
I had heard that the suspect was arrested for aggravated assault and then also some local warrants. Can you give us any details on what those warrants were?
Correct. He had warrants for his arrest. I don't have the information in front of me on what those warrants were, but the charges stemming from the incident last night were the 2 counts of aggravated assault.
And then the officer's husband, I had heard that he was taken to the hospital for a concussion. Any word on how he's doing now?
Won't give out any medical information, but he was transported for treatment.
Did that suspect offer up any motive or anything that made him do this?
Not that I know of right now, no. Okay. Now going to discuss the incidents that involved multiple stabbings that occurred late last night and early this morning. The first report that we have, all these times will be approximate times, but at approximately 11:24 p.m. last night in the 600 block of Natchez Street, we had officers that were flagged down by a group of females. When the officer went over, he observed there was a female victim that was lying on the ground in a pool of blood. The officer could see that the blood seemed to be originating from the back of her head and observed what appeared to be a large laceration on the back of her head. The victim stated that she was with a group of friends heading to 6th Street. They had taken a ride share, got out of the vehicle on 7th Street and were walking down to 6th Street when the suspect was walking in the opposite direction. It does not appear there was any interaction, any conversation or anything, but merely as the suspect passed the group, she turned around, went to the victim, and struck her in the back of the head. This was witnessed by the friends, and the victim herself also witnessed and was able to give a description of what had happened. The witnesses described seeing the suspect, after passing their group, take a swing, at the victim, hitting the victim and the victim falling to the ground. In this incident, the victim was transported to a local hospital for treatment of her injuries. Our reported time of 12:07 a.m. this morning in the 500 block of East 6th Street, we had a female victim that approached an officer and let him know that she had just been assaulted. And the victim at this point said she was standing outside on the sidewalk when the suspect came up and just struck her from behind, very similar to the incident that I just described. She said she was struck in the back of her head with something that felt like a solid object, and that she was able to see the suspect run from the scene. The victim did also have a laceration to the back of her head that was bleeding as well. The victim in this case recognized the suspect as a local homeless person that frequently hung around outside of a business that she works at in the downtown area. So she was also able to provide identification of the suspect in this incident. And at around the same time, APD officers were dispatched to East 6th Street and Red River Streets on a caller that reported a female victim had been stabbed. Officers arrived and they found a victim who had suffered lacerations to her shoulder and her wrist. The victim in this case reported a very similar interaction in that she was approached by the suspect. In this case, the suspect said something to the victim, asking her to be quiet. The suspect then returned and assaulted the victim. The victim suffered 2 lacerations that we identified at the scene and was transported to a local hospital as well for treatment. The officers working the real-time crime center realized that we had multiple stabbings occurring in a short time frame in a very close area, and began looking at all of our halo video cameras in the downtown area. Through that, they were able to both identify the suspect and track the suspect's activities after the assaults and direct officers to where the suspect was located at that time. Officers responded to the arch and located the suspect outside of the arch and took her into custody at that point and recovered the knife that we believe was used in all 3 attacks. The suspect in this case has confessed, but she confessed to stabbing 5 people. So the possibility exists that there were individuals that were assaulted last night and that have not yet come forward and reported it. So if that is the case, we need those individuals to come forward. We know from looking at our halo video cameras that a few of these assaults were captured on video. We believe in one of those videos, the person that was struck, we have not identified that person yet. They do not appear to be one of the 3 victims that we are aware of. We have a second video that we are undetermined at this point of whether it is one of the 3 victims that we've identified. So again, the suspect in this case confessed to stabbing 5 individuals. We know of 3, and if there is anyone in the community that has information, it's very important that they come forward at this time and share that with our aggravated assault unit. If you witnessed any of these assaults, if you have video of any of these assaults, or if you have information that you think would be helpful in this investigation, we ask that you call the APD Aggravated Assault Unit. I'll give you a few numbers: 512-974-5245. As always, you can call Crime Stoppers at 512-472-TIPS, or if you want to use one of the various apps, whether it be the Crime Stoppers app or the Austin Police Department app, you can go ahead and report anything you may know, and you can do it anonymously. So if we have individuals in the community that have additional information regarding this series of stabbings last night, or if you were assaulted and did not report it last night, it's important that you come forward so that we can include that in the investigation. The suspect in this case was, as I stated, arrested and has also been charged now with aggravated assault for the incidents that occurred last night. The case does remain under investigation, and again, if someone has information, we ask that you come forward. We were already working on additional plans for security in the city based on recent incidents and also leading up to the upcoming Spring Music Festival. What the community can expect to see immediately is an increased presence in the entertainment district beginning tonight. We're working to get additional officers coming in on an overtime basis, and we will work to do that throughout this weekend, having additional APD officers that will be working through this weekend. Given that a lot of the incidents that are occurring in the downtown and business areas between Cesar Chavez and 11th Street and I-35 and Congress to the west, we're going to concentrate efforts there as we did after South by Southwest last year, and we were successful during that operation. What we're working on is plans for the weeks leading up to the music festivals, and what we will be doing for that is bringing in additional resources from the police department as we've done in the past. We will have units from the organized crime division, from our metro tactical divisions. We will staff to 100% plus additional officers. We will have more officers on bikes than is normal. And we've reached out to the Department of Public Safety, who has already taken an increased presence in Austin, and they have committed no fewer than 20 troopers to assist us in this efforts. We will be working with them early next week to integrate them into the longer-term plan, but we do expect that we will have troopers in the entertainment district and around the entertainment district supporting us in these efforts, and that they will be both in vehicles but also on horseback and motorcycles as well. They have committed to assisting us in whatever way that we need. So we're going to take a very strong stance against what has been an increasing level of assault that we have seen so far this year. We've been talking about this now for several weeks. We know that in June of last year, we were down 9% in violent crime, and by the end of the year, we ended at flat, which means the 9% gain that we had achieved in reducing violent crime last year, we lost through the last 6 months of the year. And we know that the first month of this year, we have had multiple incidents of both aggravated assaults as well as homicide. So we are taking significant steps to try and address what has been a turn in the wrong direction for violent crime in this community. And we are willing to bring in anyone that is willing to assist, and we're grateful that DPS has offered that assistance. And again, this is important to highlight for the community. This is a partnership, and the community can help. If you know something, tell us. If you see something, say something. Help us keep the city of Austin safe. And with that, I'll open it up for questions on this topic.
Those two unknown victims, can you tell us where and when those assaults occurred?
I don't have the information on the one video that we have that we believe is unknown at this time. And again, the other one, we're still trying to determine if that is a victim that we've already identified.
Do you know if it happened Thursday night or early Friday morning?
It's within that 30-minute window of 11:30 at night into midnight or the few minutes afterwards.
And was it definitely downtown?
Yes.
When you say struck, I think most people think like hit, but obviously if there's blood, lacerations, and the woman had a knife, did they get stabbed? Like, can you explain that a little bit more?
We understand that the suspect was in possession of a knife, and we're going off of the descriptions that the victims provided us, and they're telling us it felt like they had been struck, but it's obvious from the wounds that they have that they were struck, and it appears as though the knife was in the hand of the suspect at the time when they were struck.
Chief, there was a describing word as a known homeless person in the area that was able to identify this suspect or this woman. Is that something that officers also were able to recognize her as a known homeless person?
I'm not sure if the officers that ended up taking her into custody and were with her last night or early this morning recognized her or not, but I do know that we show her as being homeless.
Do we know if she was on drugs, dealing with any mental health things, stuff like that?
I don't have information on whether or not she was intoxicated last night or dealing with any mental health issues.
And no indication that this suspect knew any of the victims, all completely random?
Correct. Everything at this point, again, appears as though each of these assaults was a random attack.
So Thursday night, downtown, popular area, 6th Street, at a time when most people are probably going out. I mean, what's your word of advice to the public there when there's a woman going and striking people at the back of the head with a knife?
Sure. I think the message is, as we put out before, that if you're going to go out and you're going to entertain and be with friends, do so, but do so responsibly. It's always best to be in groups and with friends and in well-lit areas. And what is also important is that as you're enjoying yourself, do so responsibly. Do not overindulge in alcohol to where you can't take care of yourself and you can't protect yourself if necessary. And again, be in groups, look out for each other, and if you see something, say something. If something looks suspicious, especially in the downtown area, you're probably not even a block away from a police officer that's on walking beat, so let us know.
Chief, do you have an explanation in terms of what feels like a spike in January in crime related with knives and these types of weapons?
I don't know that there's an easy explanation for what's going on. Again, what we have is we've had a set of individual incidents that have occurred over the past 3 weeks. Last night obviously was a series of incidents that occurred. There's nothing to link each set of incidents that have occurred so far. It is something that we're paying attention to. We're paying attention to what might be driving this, looking for any of the causative factors, but more importantly, we're also trying to prevent any future acts of violence. And I think that we've well documented that a visible police presence is one of the strongest deterrents to crime. So we, at this point in time, when we have 180 vacancies, it's a little bit more difficult to be as visible as we want. And that's why, again, we're grateful for the help from the Texas Department of Public Safety coming in and adding to that visible presence, hopefully adding to people's sense of security.
On the jail website, it looks like she's only charged with 1 count of aggravated assault. Do y'all expect her to be charged with 3 counts of aggravated assault?
That's part of the ongoing investigation, and so just because additional charges have not been filed at this time does not mean there will not be more charges forthcoming.
When state troopers come into patrol, are they kind of beholden to the same city ordinances as Austin Police, or could we see them acting with a heavier hand on some of these camping ordinances or other misdemeanors that Austin Police has been backing off on?
Typically, they do not enforce city ordinance. They will enforce state law, and they will operate under their own operating procedures, and they'll obviously operate under the same penal code that we do, but they do not traditionally enforce ordinance-driven violations.
Does it appear that these 2 unknown victims went to the hospital or did not go to the hospital?
We have no way of knowing if these two victims, they might have believed that they were just struck, and if they didn't suffer a laceration or a wound, they might have just not felt the need to report it, but it's important that they do. We do not have reports that I'm aware of at this time of individuals showing up at a hospital for treatment of a wound that is similar to this, indicating that they had been assaulted downtown.
Last question on this topic.
Chief, what do you attribute to what seems to be
It's hard to put a specific cause to this. We've had a lot change in our community over the past 8 months, and officers are working diligently to address the issues of both crime that we're seeing, but also the sense of disorder and the sense of personal safety and the overall community sentiment right now. So our officers are working very diligently to address these issues that have come up, and will continue to do so. The last thing, I understand that there may be additional questions on the marijuana resolution that passed last night. I did do press last night on this. I'll make a few opening comments, but I really am going to let this be question driven since I've kind of put it out there last night already. But as has been widely reported, the City Council did pass resolution item number 59 last night, and there's a couple key points to identify out of that. First and foremost, marijuana was not decriminalized. That is an action that can only be taken by the state legislature and not be done through direction of the City Council. They cannot change state law. It was not decriminalized. It is still illegal, and the Austin Police Department will still enforce marijuana law. If we come across people in the community that are smoking marijuana or in possession of marijuana, we will take enforcement action. We have taken many steps in this community to implement practices and policies that are reflective of minimizing the impact of low-level violations and arrests, but it is still illegal, and we will still enforce the law.
I guess what was that enforcement going to look like, Chief? What if somebody is smoking a joint on the side of the street? I mean, if it's personal use, that's what kind of the language that the City Council has used. Is your officer going to stop? Are they going to question them? I guess what is that interaction going to look like?
A lot of the conversation has been talking about the Austin Police Department shouldn't prioritize marijuana enforcement, and that we're deprioritizing marijuana enforcement. To be clear, low-level marijuana enforcement has not been a priority. We deal with it when we come across it. If we're called to situations and marijuana is involved, if we make traffic stops and marijuana is involved, we will handle it. We are proactive in the larger level drug dealing, whether it be larger level marijuana dealing, and then that is also normally accompanied with other drugs, meth, heroin, cocaine, and the like. So we are very aggressive in our approach to the higher level distribution, but the low level marijuana possession and use has never been a priority for the department, but we also enforce the law when we come across it. So at this point, nothing will change. Officers that come across someone smoking marijuana or in possession of marijuana, we will handle it as we have, and that is either through cite and release, if the person is eligible for cite and release and the violation is eligible, or if the appropriate response is the arrest, then that will be made. We will continue to evaluate the resolution that was passed, and I would remind everyone that the resolution has the city manager going back to mayor and council by May with any recommended changes to APD's policies and practices. So we will take a look at our policies and practices, but at this point, the direction that has been given to the officers is that we have not changed our enforcement protocols today as they were yesterday and the week before, but we will be looking at the resolution to determine if there's anything that we should be doing differently based on the actions that City Council took last night.
I mean, at the end of the day, can City Council tell police what they can and can't enforce?
This was a direct question that came out on social media. I think all of you retweeted it. And so to directly answer the question, no, a city council does not have the authority to tell a police department not to enforce a state law. Now, we are always trying to work with our community, and we're trying to ensure that our practices align with community expectations. And this goes back to steps we've already taken as a city, implementing policies that we believe are reasonable. If we look at how we've approached many things in the city of Austin, looking back a year or so, the juvenile curfew, we agreed that maybe the juvenile curfew wasn't necessary anymore and that we could still maintain the public safety without a juvenile curfew. So we did that. We looked at our enforcement of some laws that definitely had disparate outcomes, such as driving while license invalid, and could we handle that outside of making that custody arrest? All of these things, increasing the use of cite and release, increasing the violations for which cite and release can be used. We are a progressive police department. We are often held out amongst our peer agencies as one of the agencies that is more progressive than others. and we will always look to make sure that we are employing best practices, practices that we think meet the community standards. But at the end of the day, as a police department, we are charged with keeping the community safe, and that comes with enforcing the law.
Chief, how does that affect DPS that are coming to assist? Are they going to follow the directives that the city officers are doing, or are they going to do their thing, and how does that give and take work?
DPS, again, will be operating under their own guidelines. They have their own policy manuals, and obviously they're enforcing the same state laws that we're enforcing. That being said, we have a very strong working relationship with DPS. They have been in our community many times. They have come and helped us with the large music festivals that have occurred in years past. They were here side by side with us through the bombings, and we have always worked positively with them. And that's what the meetings next week will be, is kind of delineating the areas of responsibility that we would like DPS to assist us with, and them letting us know what they can help with. And although they will not necessarily be enforcing city ordinances, we do expect that they'll be supporting us, again, in both the visible presence, but also in enforcing any laws that will help keep the city safe and address what we're seeing as a growing crime trend, especially in the downtown area.
What steps has the department taken between the state hemp law going into effect and this resolution to move toward THC concentration testing or enhance that capability?
We were working in our lab to develop the protocols to test marijuana so that we could determine the quantification of THC. I think it's been widely reported that with the legislation that legalized hemp, we now have to be able to prove that a substance is above 1/3 of 1% THC for it to qualify as cannabis instead of hemp. We were working in our lab. Our folks were putting together protocols so that we could perform that testing here, and we were also looking to acquire instrumentation that would allow for those calculations as well. With the actions that were taken by City Council last night, those operations will cease. We will no longer have people in our lab working to come up with a methodology that will allow us to test for the quantification of THC, and we will now await the work that's being done in other labs to see if they can put together a protocol that we would then look to implement in our lab.
So that equipment was not purchased?
That particular piece of equipment actually is a redundant piece of equipment. It wasn't being purchased to test marijuana. It can test for many different substances. Marijuana was just one of them. So that was not the purpose behind purchasing that piece of equipment.
And you already have purchased it now?
You already have one of those, correct? It is capable of all that as well, just the protocols weren't in place?
Correct. We already have the machine, and if we were to need another machine or need a backup machine, then it was for something beyond just marijuana testing. So we would have a legitimate need for testing other drugs and other substances.
Can you still purchase that piece of equipment? Because you still, I assume if that machine goes down, you're gonna have trouble testing all the other substances that come in.
I'll have to see if that actual purchase went through. But again, we already had one of those. That was to increase capacity and also to build in redundancy. Thank you.
So now that you all have this machinery to test the marijuana, when you guys still do it for, low-level offenses, like what are stopping you guys from doing that? Is it the cite and release policy, or what?
So we have the instrumentation that's capable of testing, but there are no protocols established yet. So the lab was working to develop the protocols. In other words, how do you test to establish a certain percentage of THC? There's a lot of work that has to go into that, and then a lot of validation to show that the method we would be using would not only be accurate, but would be acceptable to the courts, since this would be evidence in criminal trials. So although the instrumentation exists, there is not yet a methodology that we have in place that allowed for that quantification.
How many low-level marijuana arrests did you guys make last year, or a rough estimate?
We'll give you those statistics, but there again, we saw a much reduced number, and we've got statistics that are both arrests that were made for marijuana only and charges that were filed for marijuana in addition to other charges. Thank you.